You open the app without thinking, just a reflex, and within 4 seconds, you are already measuring their vacation, their body, their apartment, their life. You didn't mean to do it, you never do. But something ancient inside you couldn't help it. And here is the strange part. That pull you feel, that gnawing, uncomfortable urge to stack your life against someone else's, has nothing to do with insecurity. It has nothing to do with vanity. It is not a flaw. It is a survival mechanism that is at least 150,000 years old, firing inside a brain that has never seen a smartphone before. The real reason you can't stop comparing yourself to others has nothing to do with who you are. It has everything to do with what you are. You are a social animal, and social animals don't survive alone. For the vast majority of human history, your ancestors lived in small groups, rarely more than 150 people. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar spent decades studying the upper limit of how many stable relationships a human brain can genuinely maintain, and he kept arriving at the same number. Around 150, not 500, not 10,000. Just 150 people, give or take. That is the social world your brain was built for. A world where everyone knew everyone, where your rank within the group was the difference between eating and starving, between protection and exposure, between surviving the winter and not. In that world, knowing where you stood wasn't optional. It was life or death. So your brain built a system, a relentless, automatic, deeply wired ranking system that never turns off. Psychologists call it social comparison. Leon Festinger was the first to formally describe it in 1954. He noticed something strange about human beings. When we want to know how good we are at something, how smart, how strong, how skilled, we don't measure ourselves against an objective standard. We measure ourselves against other people, specifically people who seem similar to us. That instinct, Festinger argued, isn't a bug. It's the whole point. In a world without standardized tests or performance metrics, other people were the only measuring stick that mattered. And the brain got very, very good at using it. Here is what happens inside you when you scroll past someone's highlight reel. Your brain registers a social signal. Someone in your perceived group is displaying status, resources, attractiveness, success. And before your conscious mind has even processed the image, your brain has already run the comparison, already filed a verdict, already triggered a response. The whole process takes milliseconds. You experience it as a feeling, a dull drop in your chest, a flicker of inadequacy, a sudden, vague dissatisfaction with your own life that wasn't there 5 seconds ago. That feeling is ancient. The trigger is brand new. Psychologist Sonia Lyubomirsky has spent years studying what she calls the asymmetry of social comparison. What she found is striking. Upward comparisons, comparing yourself to someone doing better, reliably produce negative emotion. Downward comparisons, comparing yourself to someone doing worse, produce a temporary lift, but it fades fast and often leaves guilt behind. The brain, it turns out, is biased towards the upward look. It fixates on the people above you in the hierarchy. Not because you are masochistic, because in a small ancestral group, those were the people who held the resources. Watching them closely was rational. Understanding their advantages was essential. Closing the gap, when possible, meant survival. The problem is that the ancestral group had 150 people. Your phone has access to 8 billion. You are not scrolling through your village. You are scrolling through a curated highlight reel of the entire human species. The wealthiest people on Earth, the most conventionally beautiful, the most accomplished, the most enviable moments of the most extraordinary lives. And your comparison engine, built to measure you against 50 or 100 people you actually knew, is trying to run that same calculation against an infinite, algorithmically optimized stream of peak human performance. It is like trying to measure a puddle against every ocean on Earth simultaneously. The result is always the same. You lose. And you will keep losing until you understand what the system was actually built to do. Researcher Nicholas Epley at the University of Chicago has studied how humans misread the inner lives of others. One of his most consistent findings is this. People dramatically overestimate how happy, how confident, and how put together other people actually are. You see someone's surface. You compare it to your interior, your chaotic, anxious, uncertain, doubting interior. And you conclude that they have something you don't, that they figured something out that you haven't, that their life actually looks the way it appears on the outside. Epley calls this the illusion of transparent self-knowledge. You know all your own mess. You see none of theirs. The comparison is never fair. It was never designed to be. Here is what your ancestors actually compared: hunting skill, speed, endurance, accuracy with tools, social alliances, knowledge of the land. These were the real currencies of the group, and comparison served a direct function. It told you where to improve. It pointed to the gap between where you were and where the group needed you to be. Social comparison wasn't corrosive back then. It was calibrating. It made individuals better and it made groups stronger. That calibration function still exists inside you. It's why watching someone more skilled than you can make you train harder. Why seeing someone build something extraordinary can push you to build something yourself. Psychologists call this the inspiration effect. Upward comparison, under the right conditions, when the person above you feels attainable, reachable, like someone who started where you started, produces motivation instead of despair. The gap feels like direction, not distance. The problem is attainability. The people flooding your feed rarely feel reachable. They feel like another species. And when the gap is too large, too abstract, too perfectly curated, the ancient calibration engine doesn't produce motivation. It produces paralysis. It produces shame. It produces the quiet conviction that you are simply behind, that everyone else is living a version of life that you somehow missed the invitation to. You didn't miss anything. The invitation doesn't exist. The version of their life you're comparing yourself to doesn't exist either. But your brain doesn't know that. It still thinks it's sitting around a fire with 149 people. It still thinks the stakes are life or death. It still thinks that watching who has more means something about whether you survive. So what do you do with a system this old? You can't turn it off. Festinger was clear about that. Social comparison is automatic and unconscious. Telling yourself to stop comparing is like telling your heart to stop beating. The behavior is happening below the level of conscious instruction. What you can do is change the inputs. Change who you compare yourself to. Research by Thomas Mussweiler at the University of Cologne found that the most psychologically healthy form of social comparison is temporal, comparing yourself to your own past self rather than to other people. When the reference point shifts from them to a previous version of you, the engine still runs. But now it is producing something useful. Evidence of your own growth. A gap that is actually yours to close. Your ancestors didn't compare themselves to strangers they would never meet. They compared themselves to who they were last season. Was the hunt better? Were the tools sharper? Was the shelter stronger? Progress was the metric, not performance against someone else's highlight reel. Think about the last time you felt genuinely good about something you did. Not because someone else hadn't done it better, but because you knew clearly that you had done it better than before. That feeling is not smaller than the feeling of beating someone else. It is more durable. It does not depend on what anyone else does or doesn't do. It is entirely yours. That is what the system was built for, to show you the gap between where you are and where you can be, not the gap between you and 8 billion strangers. The next time you open the app, you will still feel the pull. The comparison will still fire. That is not failure. That is 150,000 years of survival circuitry doing exactly what it was designed to do. But now you know what it's looking for. It is not trying to make you feel small. It is trying to keep you alive. It is trying to close a gap. Give it a real gap to close. Give it your own past to measure against. Give it something it can actually use. Tonight, when you catch yourself measuring your life against someone else's, remember this. The voice doing the measuring is ancient. It has kept your lineage alive through ice ages and famines and predators and plagues. It is not your enemy. It is just very, very confused about where it is. It thinks it is still sitting around a fire. It thinks the stakes are still survival. And in a way, it's right. It's just measuring the wrong thing. And give it something worth measuring.